because this Michigan team can score. It's not like there's some stagnant bunch that relies on their defense.
Welcome to the Street.
I think he can win us games. I think, thank you for your service, Cliff. But I go back and watch last year.
We've got a little baby version of Wendell White, Reggie Bush cooking with Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. Katron Allen runs the ball. Nobody wants to tackle him. People bounce off.
Hey, Straight from the Crest listeners. Stat Guy Chris here to remind you that this episode is brought to you in part by our friends over at Protocol Beverage. Made by a few dudes in Erie, PA who wondered, why doesn't zero-carb beer exist? Protocol's new light shift gives you the ultimate beer experience with 0 carbs, a mere 80 calories, and they're shifting to what light beer should be. Savor the crisp, refreshing taste without compromising on flavor. Thanks, Protocol.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Straight from the Crest podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michael David Kresovich. Big show today as the Penn State Nittany Lions will play in its first ever college football playoff game this upcoming Saturday at home against the Mustangs of SMU. As for big games, we bring on big guests. With me always is my partner Garrett and Big Game Beck. Today we're going to talk about Penn State's crushing loss to Oregon that may not be so crushing after all, preview the Mustangs, and give our predictions for this first round college football playoff game. As always, this episode is brought to you by Protocol Beverage. Link in bio, must be 21 in order to enjoy. So Penn State loses by 8 in the Big Ten title game. They miss out on the number 1 seed, but now they're sitting at the number 6 overall seed in the playoff, and they have a very favorable route to that semifinal game. Assuming Penn State, if they take care of business this weekend, they play Georgia. First, I want to welcome both of you to the show. Garrett, are you feeling better, or are we still sick here?
It kind of goes in waves towards the end of the day. My gosh, Mikey vanished. Towards the end of the day, it gets a little worse, and then overnight it gets worse, and then during the morning it gets a little better. So it's just a vicious cycle here. But if I'm a little nasally, that's why. So been battling the winter plague.
And our friends up in Erie, is the snow cleared there, Justin? What's going on?
Yeah, you know what? It's warmed up over the last couple days here. The snow is melting, and then the big piles are getting removed on the back of dump trucks. So Erie is back to normal. We can drive around. No life-threatening hazards in the roadways anymore.
Before we really dive into SMU and preview the game, let's touch on the Oregon game. Of course, Penn State with an 8-point loss, turns the ball over late. There was a couple of instances during that game, guys, I really want to address. A couple of controversial things. I'll start with Garrett first. A lot of talk about that 2-point conversion early on. The thought process there, obviously, is they didn't want to play for overtime. They wanted to limit the amount of possessions, and they wanted to win the game in regulation. Were you for that, against it? Where's your head at there?
Yeah, I really don't like it. I think it kind of just stunts momentum. I mean, it's great if you get it, but you're already battling back. You're trying to keep yourself in the game, and then you just kind of you put yourself in a position to kind of have a negative setback when you're trying to like work yourself back into a game that you have been behind the entire time. So I don't know why. Like, we did it against Michigan, I think last year at home, down 14-3, score before the end of the half, go for 2 and don't get it. I don't know why you're chasing points so early. Like, put another point on the board, you're down a touchdown. It just makes the game feel different. You got the ball with 2 minutes left, and you're like, well, you got to score a touchdown, and we still have to get the 2-point conversion. And it just didn't seem totally necessary to me. The explanation was kind of like, gave us the best chance to win in regulation. How about try to get back into the game first? So, yeah, I mean, maybe the book says it. I know Coach Franklin's a big relier on, or heavily reliant on the analytical book they got somewhere on the sideline. But I don't know. That's clearly something that's been a philosophy of this group, over the last several years. I mean, we lost; it didn't really matter. But in the course of the game, it's just like that seems like an unnecessary shot in the foot, I guess, when you're trying to come back against number 1 team in the country.
Do we think this book that they refer to, do we think it's like a sorcerer's book? It's a really old leather case that the strength coach Galt just pulls out from under the heater, and he's like, here you go.
Yes, that's definitely what it is. That's what I envision in my mind.
That's what I picture it too.
Yeah.
So I have a completely different take. I feel like it's an iPad Franklin has that the stats nerds underneath the stadium just push a pop-up message to that says go for 2 or go for it on 4th downs. Franklin,
I don't know if you've ever been under the stadium.
What's
There's not enough room.
no, they have a
hide.
place for the nerds.
Okay, the nerds.
There's a
Okay.
whole like people don't get. There's like a whole infrastructure of just stuff you don't know about Beaver Stadium. Like there's definitely what Justin said is definitely true. Also, the make some noise guy in the, like during on the intercom, that's actually a person. People don't know that. And also, DJ PJ still does all the music at the stadium for wherever he is. He used to do
From
it
Rutgers.
from the top of he does it from Rutgers now. He used to do it from the top of the Bryce Jordan Center. People don't know these things. But there is a guy, Penn State pays $10,000 a game to yell, make some noise when when it's necessary.
You can't get this info at anywhere else but the Straight from the Crest podcast.
This is
groundbreaking thing. So anyways, Penn State doesn't get it after they go for 2. They end up being in a position with the ball in the 4th quarter, down 8 points. It's a short yardage situation. Drew Lar takes a deep shot and it's ultimately intercepted. Beck, was that the right play call there? Do you like the aggressiveness? Talk about that.
You'd want it back, but and also it was coming off a timeout, so like you'd think that maybe we would have something actually schemed up instead of, let's give our guy a shot. But I don't hate it, right? Like Harrison had been winning some of those one-on-one battles. Harrison had a really good game. He made a really tough contested catch in the end zone on 4th down. He was productive all game, and I think Drew was also pretty productive all game. And he had the 2 picks, but he showed a lot in that game that I don't think we'd seen from him previously. So I don't hate the decision to let Drew go for 1 and throw it to Harrison, especially given the games the 2 are playing. You want it back, and I don't think we saw the ball again after that. So it's a tough way to end the game, but maybe they could have schemed something up and had a couple plays coming out of the timeout that we could do and change the pace on them. But we throw 50-50 balls not super frequently, and maybe that was the change of pace they were looking for. So I don't think second guessing it's the right thing to do. I think you just live with it and move on.
So that was almost 2 weeks ago now, as we're almost 2 weeks away from the game. The following day was Selection Sunday. Penn State finds out it's going to host a playoff game, relatively easy pass. As you're watching the show, and we kind of already knew, or we didn't know it would be this advantageous for Penn State to be in the position where it would be, but I'll direct this question to Garrett. Garrett, how fortunate are the Nittany Lions to be positioned where they are right now?
Yeah, advantageous is a good word. I'm getting a little nervous about the jinx coming, Mikey, with you talking about it being an easy path, and we just got an easy one to get to Georgia. Like you are putting the hex on the Nittany Lions. Maybe you're just oblivious to the college football gods. I don't know. You're making me nervous, and I'm going to call it out.
That's fair. I already filled out my bracket.
Yes, yeah, fair enough. Yes, we have we have the biggest cakewalk ever. Like the biggest cakewalk ever, and it makes me terrified. Like I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Like I might pick SMU. Like I don't know. Like I'm trying. I have to do something to counteract everything you're doing to jinx us, Mikey. Because in the end, like when it comes down to football, there's just no reason that Penn State should really struggle this week or next week, other than the fact that you got to roll the balls out and play, and we'll see. I mean, I think this is different than playing Ohio State. This is different than playing Oregon. But and I guess maybe we can talk about this more later on, but like the repercussions of not taking advantage of the draw that we have gotten will be a media and just perspective and appearance nightmare for this program. We are already, they don't beat anybody. I mean, the stat that we haven't beaten a top 5 team or something like that, or we've only beaten one in 25 years is pretty damning. Okay. And the fact that I just saw Chris Fallica tweet out, if Penn State were to go and win the whole thing, they would have to beat 3 top 10 teams. And that would be more top 10 teams Penn State's beaten in the last 11 years combined. So, there's I'm very nervous as a fan, just because the optics of losing this type of game are bad. And so I have to do something and take it into my own hands to counteract some of this this crazy talk about how easy the path is, Mike.
Listen,
because you're right, but
yeah.
we just don't say it. We whisper that. We should be whispering.
I also will say, if Penn State does go on to do what, I'm not going to say it, don't worry, but adding those top 10 wins this year is easier than any other year, because this is the only year where everyone's in position to play as many guaranteed top 10 games because of the new playoff. Teams weren't doing that in the past. Sure, you go on, you probably play a top 10 team in your conference championship game, but you're not guaranteed to play one. As we saw a couple years ago, last year, with Washington making it, which technically, yes, they were a top 10 team, but we saw upsets, and now we're able to, Penn State's path, you're bound to run into those top 10 teams. But before we dive into SMU, what they're all about, predictions, Justin, Penn State, couple roster moves this week. Bo Pribilla is out. He will not be part of Penn State's team. Franklin has a rule that if you enter the transfer portal, you are done. You're off the team. It's either you're in or out kind of deal. The way it's set up, he's off right now. He is not on Penn State's roster. Ethan Grunkemeyer will be the backup in control there. And also, Penn State added a wide receiver. You just want to touch on those?
Yeah, so when it comes to Bo, I think so Franklin does have the rule that when you enter the transfer portal, you're off the team. Now, he did release a statement and said that with every rule there are exceptions, and that they tried to find an exception with Bo, but they didn't feel like Bo could prepare as the starter as he has been all year, as well as go on some of these visits that he's being asked to go on with programs that are interested in him. So I think Franklin was willing to make an exception for Bo, given the circumstance and the position that he's put in, because he is a Power 4 starting quarterback somewhere, and he will find a spot to land, and I really hope he does well. And it is a really tough position for him to be in. I do think that the two sides tried to work together, and it just didn't work out. But then when you look at the flip side, SMU's backup quarterback, who started for them all last year and started some games this year, also entered the transfer portal, and he will be available on Saturday. So, there's two different schools of thought there. I understand Franklin's. I can also understand SMU's. Some unfortunate news that came out. Kevin Winston, he had a ACL tear. I guess it was a partial tear. I was holding out hope personally that he would be back for a potential playoff run. Franklin said he will not be back, and he released a statement saying that he'll be going to the NFL. So, we've been without him all year, and I think that the game against Oregon was really the first time I've seen our secondary really get, manhandled like that, for lack of a better word. I think he could have been a difference maker in that game. He's a phenomenal player, and we've definitely missed him on the back end this year. In the transfer portal news, we have a wide receiver coming in from USC. He's a very solid player. He's had some highlight catches, especially in the game against LSU. I think it's step one. Obviously, the wide receiver room still needs some work, and I think that there is a player from FIU that we're targeting, and based on the current on-3 projections, we're in the lead. But we'll see what Franklin does, and I do think that these next couple weeks, these next couple games, will play an impact on how we're perceived by some of the transfer portal targets, right? With Drew coming back, that's a big step that entices wide receivers to come back. So I brushed over that, but Drew said he's coming back, and that's a big deal for some of these wide receiver recruits. They want to go to a place where they feel like they can be targeted frequently and they can shine. So Drew coming back's big, and then going on a nice run here and changing some of that public perception about our program will also be big for bringing in some of these other wide receiver recruits.
Yep. So that's 6'1" Kyron Hudson. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. He's going to come try to help out this wide receiver room. Garrett, thoughts on roster moves this week? Any comment on Bo Pribilla? I know you've been kind of harsh on him all year long.
I don't know about that. I don't think it's clearly not Bo's fault.
Hey, this is a pro Bo podcast. If your name's Bo,
I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody. I coach a kid named Bo. I like Bo Nickel. I don't think there's any Bo that I know that I don't like. So
I have a cat named Bo.
There you go. I like Bo Jackson. I think the point I made on Twitter a couple nights ago was like, it's a complete joke. Like it cannot be overstated or understated. I think it cannot be overstated enough. Like the leaders of this sport, this multi-billion-dollar industry, are some of the most inept people on the planet, without question. Like you can't figure out a calendar to move the transfer portal to January 21st instead of December 15th because of, I mean, it hurts the sport. It hurts their bottom line. So from a business standpoint, it's moronic. So it's not like, well, it's because of money, because that's everything else in the sport. It makes absolutely no sense. Bo's kind of screwed, put in a bad position. I think there can be some argument made for, like, could you really try to grind it out and, get through the first couple weeks of the playoff? Is it going to make that much of a difference? Like, I don't really know. If Coach Franklin has that rule, which it sounds like he does, like Justin said, like, I do respect him, just kind of sticking to it. There's exceptions to every rule, which he also said. So I don't know. No hard feelings on Bo. It's a terrible situation, and it's completely indicative of the leadership in the sport. I do have a question for Justin, because I can't figure out whether Kyron Hudson is the second coming of Jerry Rice, or if he's going to be another, what's his name from Kent State that we got a couple years ago.
Dante Cephas.
Dante Cephas. Yeah, some people even in this room have been saying it's Dante Cephas. I'm also seeing on Twitter that he's going to be
KJ Hamler, and I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, so I mean, where do you, in all seriousness, like, where do you kind of lean in seeing him? I mean, obviously that one highlight catch shows up that I don't know if any of our guys can make besides 44. So what are your thoughts on that, Beck?
Yeah, I think the one thing is he is not a big receiver, right? He's 5'11", and I don't think he's like 180. No, I think he's 5'11", 180.
6'1", 205.
That's
a big frame. He might be 5'11", 185 in real life, but from personal experience, we'll call him 6'1".
Right, well, I will blame Elon Musk's new X policies for misinformation to hit my feed. But still, he's not a huge receiver, and I don't think that he should be interpreted as a one receiver, right? He wasn't the one for USC. He's not going to be the one for us. And if he is the one for us, I think that's bigger.
We're in trouble. He can't be our one.
Yeah, I think he is a very solid role player. I would expect him to be a contributor. I would not expect him to be a star. And I think that if the expectations are that going into the year, I think that people will be happy with how he performs. Now, if you're expecting him to come in and be Ryan Williams for Alabama, you're going to get disappointed. But he's a very solid player. He's a capable player, but I don't think that he is going to be like a game-breaking player for us.
I just clipped that. We'll play this next year when he scores 2 touchdowns against Ohio State. But anyways, Penn State, they started to get their beak wet in the portal. So no Bo for this weekend. Penn State, it's a noon kick. Tune into TNT. Not sure how that broadcast is going to work. Can't say I've watched a lot.
Are Chuck and the boys going to be doing the pregame or what? All right,
so they'll have the NBA Tonight crew on. But noon kick, December 21st at Beaver Stadium. Temperatures in the high 20s. Going to be clear. Some snow early in the week. I feel like we're on a weather forecast here. But the number 11 seed, SMU Mustangs, undefeated in conference play, 11-2 record. They lost a nail biter last weekend against Clemson in the ACC championship. 2 weeks ago. Their only loss is a 3-point loss against BYU. They have 2 single-digit wins on the season. The rest are 9 of their 11 wins are by double digits. They've scored 30 points in all but 3 games. This is their first year at a Power 4 level. They're the runner-up in the ACC, 11-1 final record. And we'll just kind of dive through some history here. This is actually the 3rd meeting. I don't know if you guys remember the first time they met back in the 1948 Cotton Bowl. That ended in a 13-13 tie. I don't think this weekend's game will have the same result. And then most notably, they played in 78. Penn State won 26-21. No tie there. I'm just going to give a brief roster flyover here. We talked about Kevin Jennings. He's their quarterback. He's really the guy that makes it happen. He has 27 total touchdowns on the season, 8 interception. Brashard Smith, there's running back. He has over 1,250 rushing yards, 14 rushing yards total. And backup LJ Johnson has 5 rushing yards or 5 rushing touchdowns. Their wide receiver room's pretty stacked. Roderick Daniels is their leading receiver with nearly 600. Keyshawn Smith, the Miami transfer, and Jordan Hudson transfers from TCU. A boatload of transfers here. Kobe Wilson's their leading tackler, who's a great linebacker. He is over 100, and they have 4 really, really good safeties. Their corners aren't great, but their safeties are ballers. They have 4 safeties with 3 interceptions. I'm sorry, 3 safeties with 3 picks. They're deep at the safety position. For our special team sicko gurus, Colin Rogers is their kicker. He's 23 of 31 on the season, but just 15 of 21 from 40 plus. That's something to look at. In terms of an X's and O's, Jennings is a very accurate quarterback. He's a guy that can make plays. Their offense, from watching them this year, I watched a few of their games, it kind of reminds me of the way Johnny Manziel was utilized at A&M. They like to spread out the team, their offense. They use a lot of motion. And with Jennings, they're going to see him. They put him on the move a lot. They make his life easier. They're great schematically. They return 8 on offense, 7 on defense. Head coach Rhett Lashley, former quarterback at Arkansas in the early 2000s, is in year 3. Offensive coordinator is Casey Woods, who came over from Missouri, and Scott Simons is their defensive coordinator. Garrett, from what you've seen from SMU this year, what are your initial thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a really good game-breaking player, quarterback in Jennings. He's their second leading rusher as well. Topping, I think, over 400 yards on the season so far. With Brashard Smith as the leading rusher, just under 400 yards on the season for Jennings. Brashard Smith, the leading rusher, at 1,200 yards. But something to keep in mind, Kevin Jennings has over 3,000 yards passing. And he didn't start the first 3 games, I believe, or the first 2 games. Preston Stone did. So this team, it's hard to take into account. They barely beat Nevada early in the season. Didn't play well against BYU and lost, but that was when they made the switch to Jennings from Stone in the game against BYU, and Stone obviously started against Nevada. So they're solid, and they can absolutely win if Penn State, comes out and plays poor. I would say Penn State have to play poorly for SMU to go up and win this game. And so, they, like you mentioned, they've played a couple close games. They've played 2 real ranked opponents. 3 real ranked opponents. I wouldn't consider the Pitt game, against a top 25 caliber team. Full disrespect to Pittsburgh on that too. Everything's intended on there. They're just not very good. The Clemson game, Louisville, and then BYU, all those games were tight. Lost the Clemson game, lost the BYU game, was a touchdown game against Louisville. And then the game people forget about is the game at Duke, where they really should have lost the game. They ended up finding a way to pull it out in overtime on the road. So I think it all comes down to, can the quarterback Jennings make game-breaking plays? I think Penn State is much stronger at the line of scrimmage than SMU. We'll go deeper into kind of the back and forth between the 2 teams. But SMU, I would liken talent-wise to and capability-wise in the USC, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa,
Bowling Green.
I think Indiana, Bowling Green. Yeah, I'd say they're a little better than Bowling Green, but I put them in that category. I do think Indiana's probably a little bit better overall, just because they're a different machine. But when it comes from a talent perspective, blue chip ratio, they're down in barely breaking 100. And so they are a program in the future that's going to be a wagon, I think, in the ACC, just because of how much money is being pushed into SMU. And obviously everybody, if college football history, those alums in that part of the country have been just dying for, the opportunity to fund money into SMU. But, this is just their kind of coming out party. And, I think a lot of it comes down to Jennings, just because at the line of scrimmage, Penn State clearly is the superior team.
Justin, Franklin quoted this team and said they're very good, and they get their guys in space. They use, like I mentioned before, a lot of designated rollouts, a lot of motion. How does a team with this much speed, how does Penn State prepare for that? Do they just keep playing their brand of football? But we also saw them get exposed against a very speedy team last week on the outside. What's Penn State's defensive game plan for this game?
Yeah, so you mentioned the game they had against Duke where they struggled, Garrett. And so I think one of the big things we can do is we can hire Manny Diaz for the upcoming playoff run.
Yeah, I'd agree.
That'd be
I mean, truthfully, he probably gave them some, hey, here's this.
He probably did. Yeah. Well, and also verbal meme Spider-Man laying on the bed and look, or maybe it's Batman laying on the bed looking at the picture of something. I forget. Yeah. We'll put it up there. I tried to verbal meme. I'm not good at that. I'm not like PFT, but I know what I'm talking about. I miss Manny Diaz. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So I don't think that this is the same caliber of offense as Oregon was. But yeah, they like to get the quarterback in space. He's obviously a very dynamic athlete. he is turnover prone, though. I know you said he's accurate. He does have a pretty decent completion percentage, but he has thrown 8 picks, and he also is fairly prone to fumble. So when I watched 3 games in the past few days to try and prep for this. It was the Duke game, it was the Pitt game, and it was the Clemson game, right? I wanted to see a game where they boat race somebody with Pitt. I wanted to see the weirdness that happened in the Duke game, and I wanted to watch the Clemson game. Unfortunately, I couldn't watch it live because it was the same time as the Penn State game. But I saw a quarterback who is very dynamic with his feet. I saw a quarterback who can make big-time throws. I also saw a quarterback that really trusts his players and will throw 50-50 balls to his wide receivers if you leave them one-on-one. On the flip side, I saw a quarterback that can push a little too hard when he feels like he needs to. You know, he's made some unfortunate throws across his body into the middle of the field, and he's paid for it. I've also seen a quarterback who can be loose with the football while he's trying to extend and fumble it. So he's a dynamic playmaker, but I do think we have the athletes to keep him contained, and I am optimistic that our secondary will hold up in the back end against this SMU team. As far as the game plan goes, we have Abdul Carter. He's a very dynamic player. I don't know that we want to completely take him out of the pass rush game, but in critical downs, if we want to treat him like a QB spy and move him into that position where he's just hovering over the line of scrimmage, spying the quarterback, I would not be upset at all if I saw that on critical third down plays where we thought that there was a risk of the quarterback using his legs to extend.
Yeah, I know we've mentioned Landon at first, but if you guys are in front of Landon Tangwall on Twitter, he does a great job. He breaks down all this, and his big takeaways, he mentioned Abdul Carter. I think he said he could, quote, work. I don't know what that means. I'll have to Urban Dictionary it, but there's going to be a mismatch, and I think Abdul Carter is an area to exploit. I'm interested to see kind of how they prep for him and how they prep for Tyler Warren exclusively. But Garrett, SMU hasn't won a bowl game since 2012. Obviously, SMU is one of the more historic programs, but they don't have that sexy factor that the Ohio State, Tennessee, Alabama has. They don't have that fan base. Everyone who's a Dallas fan is nice. They're all great people. They're probably the best fan base in the world, but that's a far away from State College. What's the difference going to be like from a culture standpoint? How crucial is this home field advantage going to be for Penn State?
Yeah, it's a good question. They've never played in an environment like this. Even at 12, even with a cut down Penn State student section, whatever you want to say about that. They've just never been in this position in modern college football. I mean, obviously the late 70s, early 80s was a bit manufactured with the Pony Express, and they were obviously paying the guys to get in there, and Eric Dickerson and Craig James, and that is what they are known for. But they got the death penalty, and they've been irrelevant for the better half of a century, really. So going through the lineup of the teams that they've played in the this season and in the ACC. I would say probably going to BYU is probably something that they can take from and say we've been in somewhat of a difficult position like this. But being on this stage, I think it gives them a little bit of, hey, we have nothing to lose, which makes them a bit dangerous. But it's going to be very interesting to see, how they're able to handle it. I mentioned that I don't think they're great at the line of scrimmage. Both sides of the ball, rushing defense. Yeah, they're solid, but there's been a couple games this season where they've played a competent rushing offense, and both times they gave up well over 100 yards on the ground. All the other times, they just really weren't solid or playing anybody very solid up at the line of scrimmage. And then offensively, they don't really run the ball very well, and so that just shows me that at the line they're not very strong. And so, in a game that's going to be cold, in a game that's going to be on the road for them, Penn State's got to get the hooks in and clamp down at the line of scrimmage. I think Penn State probably has the best 2 players on the field on both sides of the ball when it comes to Tyler Warren on offense and Abdul Carter on defense. I think the biggest wild card is going to be Jennings. Can he go make plays with his feet? He's had a couple games up near 100 yards rushing, but if you look at their wide receivers, Harrison Wallace would be the leading wide receiver on their team with over 600 yards. They only have a couple of guys that really push 500 yards. So they spread the ball around, but they don't have a lot of great game breakers on the outside. It really is a one-man show, which in the ACC you can kind of get away with. And you can pick off a team like Penn State one time with that type of player. I can't see them making a deep run, with how they're made up. But just with the composition of the entire scenario, it's definitely a different situation that they're in. And I think the fan base, I wouldn't say call the fan base rabid, but there's definitely a prideful fan base down here of SMU fans, and a lot of them are lawyers and more on the end of higher a higher elevated up in the higher tax brackets, if you will. So I think they're going to be okay if they lose, but they're not an Alabama fan base, if that's what you're asking, or a UT fan base or an A&M fan base. But I think they have the potential because they have that aura about them. They have that a little bit of that history, and they're going to have the money. So I think Rhett Lashley is liking the position he's in, year one, winning in the ACC, because they're just, I think, this is only the beginning for a team like SMU.
Yeah, I mean, they have the exact number here. I mentioned earlier, but 20 of their 22 starters are from the portal at some point. They all didn't come
That's
last
wild.
year, but they've been there. So this is a team that's been built. Justin, Penn State's an 8.5 point favorite. I'm seeing the over under at 46.5. Thoughts on the prediction? I deliberately went to you first.
At this point, are we giving my score prediction here?
Yeah. Tell me how the game's gonna go, and
Okay.
what do you think about the lines?
Yeah, so I'm going to echo something that Garrett said earlier, where there is so much rat poison around this game and around where Penn State is seated that it makes me sick. It is the setup for us, if we lose, is going to be catastrophic for our program. It's going to be catastrophic for our players. It's going to be catastrophic for the fan base. Franklin might get arrested midfield if we lose this game. They won't let him into the locker room.
That, everything you said, cannot be overstated. I just want to echo that.
Yeah.
Can't be overstated.
With that said, we're going to win. We're going to cover 8.5, and it's going to be under 40 points. I'm seeing like 24-10. I don't know that the cold is going to have as much of an effect as people want to say, because we both have to play in 20-degree weather. But
That's true.
Good
point.
That does, I think, keep the scoring down a little bit. And I do think that it helps us by a margin over them, because we live up here. We're used to the weather, but we're not it's not like our offense is the Maryland Eye and we run it up the middle every time. We get guys in space too. We like to use that style of offense. So both of these teams like to play in space. Now, I think our running game will be a dominant factor in this game, and I do think that that's why we win, because even though they do have statistically a very good rush defense, and they also have statistically a very good pressure defense and getting to quarterbacks, our offensive line has answered the test, I feel, over and over again, especially when it comes to keeping Drew clean. We've gone up against multiple solid pass rushers, solid pass rush units, and they have kept Drew clean, and I don't think that will change. One thing that I do want to highlight here is in the ACC championship game, the kicker came up short from 53. So now you factor in the fact that it is going to be 20 degrees. He's probably coming up short from 50. So SMU is going to be put in really tough positions, especially given his accuracy above 40 yards. SMU is going to be put in a bunch of tough positions in that high red area in between the 30 and 40, where they have to decide, am I going for this? Am I going to let the kicker kick it, or do I just punt it away? So I think that the game can be won in that area, and I think that if we can bow up and keep them away from that actual red zone area, this game can be very lopsided in favor of Penn State. So 24-10 Penn State. Those are my reasons why, and I'll hand it back to you, Mike.
I'm not too far off. I had this game. Stat guy Chris, shout out to him, has our model 27-13 Penn State with the win. I think this is a game. I also want to shout out Nolan Rucci. I think he's played great at the right tackle position. The transfer from Wisconsin stepping in there. He's been excellent this year. Can't say enough. And to your point, Justin, they're talking about how how they compare nationally. I think you have to look at who they play. And I'm not discrediting them at all, but I think this is something you have to take in right now and evaluate. they haven't played the talent Penn State's played, and that's not their fault. But that's why the playoffs are here, to put the good teams against the good teams, the good teams by record against the good teams by record. That's why they have a 12-team playoff, and we're going to find out, hey, is Penn State legit, or is SMU just this team of destiny? But I have it at 27-13. I think Nick Singleton and Katron Allen both find the end zone. I think Abdul Carter has 2 sacks. I'll put that on it. And I think this is a game that Penn State just kind of coasts in the second half, and they get out of here and gear up against the Heisman runner-up next week, Sean Genty.
Do I pick now? Yeah, Sean Genty. I like that. I think it's Aston. Ston Genty. I thought it was Ashton Genty for a second. It is Ashton Genty. There we go. All right, that's fine. Whatever. I'm Travis Hunter stan over here, so just kidding. I don't think he should have won, but that's besides the point. Yeah. Well, that's an argument for a different time. Yeah, and honestly, I was wrong. SMU didn't even play at BYU earlier in the year, so like their hardest road game of the season was like a noon game at Louisville, or if you want to say them playing at Duke was the toughest road environment they've been at, which is saying a lot. So they truly have not seen anything like what they're going to see Saturday. You know, I go back through just kind of the list of games Penn State's played this year, and, you know, at West Virginia, tough environment to play in, West Virginia Super Bowl, beat them, right? Night game against Illinois, 120-17. If they had a field goal kicker, it's easily 27-7, 34-7 against a top 25 team. USC on the road, that was clearly USC's last stand, right? You just go down through the list. At Wisconsin at night the week after playing USC, close loss to Ohio State, close loss to Oregon. Both of those games lost in different ways, where Penn State competed with the other team, who clearly a top 2 or 3 team, in different ways, right? They played Ohio State tough in a phone booth. They played Oregon in a track meet pretty tough. Penn State's offense is starting to come alive a little bit, is what gives me a little bit more confidence that when they absolutely have to have it, they can go and find offense. And it's something we didn't talk about. I wanted to bring up and I totally forgot, but and I know we're doing picks. When Penn State has been in chase mode this year, their offense has been terrific. When they were in chase mode against USC, offense was fantastic. Against Oregon, the offense, ran for 300 yards, averaging 15 yards a carry. Minnesota at times in the second half, the offense looked really good. I just think that if Penn State gets in a position where things get a little dicey, they have too much for SMU to handle, and especially at the line of scrimmage. So I'm with you guys where I think that it's probably lower scoring. The over-under is 40. What is it, 40 and a half? What is the number?
It's
I probably shouldn't. Is it 53? Well, I like the under. I like the under in the Oregon game, and that was wrong. So, but I just think that Penn State's going to control the line of scrimmage. It makes me a little bit nervous, the lack of, the lack or the willingness to adjust from Tom Allen. If they don't have the right game plan early on, clearly he doesn't do a good job against teams who have a lot of firepower and trying to figure it out. And we saw that against Oregon. With that being said, I think the line of scrimmage is just too much of a disparity. And so I think I like Penn State probably something like 27-17. I think it's probably a competitive game, but I think they just stay at an arm's length. And so I'm nervous making that pick. I almost thought I was going to come on here and pick against them just to kind of counteract all of Mikey's witchcraft and voodoo BS that he's doing to kind of jinx this game. But this is the thing that makes me nervous. I know I'm rambling here. This is the most must-win game of James Franklin's tenure. And not even James Franklin, like the Penn State program. You have to win. You can't lose this game. And that's what makes me nervous. It's nothing football-wise makes me very nervous. The thing that makes me nervous is you can't lose this game. Would be tire fire, like disaster zone for this program. If you lose
I'm sure we're really helping them out with the clean sweep of us three saying double-digit win. They're at home. But they got to play the game. It's going to be fun. It's the first playoff ever. Hopefully the show next week will be the Boise State preview and not talking recruiting, transfer portal, who to get. But I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk ball as always. Parting thoughts?
Yeah, I won't be here next week if we're talking recruiting. I will be burying my head
Oh
in
my
shame
gosh.
somewhere. So
Yeah,
I would
I'll be
really
checking out
love
this
to
program.
have another show with you gentlemen.
That's all right. That's fine. It'll be. I'll weather the storm and be the guy. But appreciate you guys joining. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Enjoy the game. Thank you.